logistics and challenges of appointment scheduling. My guest is Tom Curee. He is president of Q'd. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Bob, how are we today?
Well, let's find out. It all has to do with this whole business of appointment scheduling. First of all, appointment scheduling for what? What are we talking about
Well,
here?
I think, there's certainly we all live in an environment where we're trying to schedule so many different things, our own schedules, a lot of different things that are taking place. But we're really talking about appointment scheduling for the truck and the 3PLs who may be involved in that process. Being able to secure both on the shipper side and the receiver side what is the right appointment, right? I mean, we've been doing this for decades and decades and decades, right? And so being able to actually identify what is the right appointment.
Well, what have we been doing for decades and decades? Have we been picking up phones? Have we been emailing?
Yeah,
We've been sending carrier pigeons? What's
we've
going
sent
on?
texts, we've done everything, right? Every little layer of technology, we've continued to add actually more manual process is really what we've done. I think there was a time where we thought we had solved this by used outsourced vendors, right? To be able to go and do that work for us. But there's still been a person on the other side of that phone or that email that's manually doing a lot of these interventions.
When you say outsourced vendors, you mean entities whose sole job was to coordinate the appointments?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would liken it to, as an industry, we've put a Band-Aid over this problem, right? The problem's still there, but there's just a Band-Aid sitting on it. And we've been able to do that, and it's helped us become more conscious of what that costs to actually go out and schedule and do those appointments. But we still know, on average, you're spending anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes to actually procure an appointment. And so that's a lot of man hours. I mean, we heard Dan Lewis say yesterday that there's over 100 million man hours tied to appointment scheduling in the industry right now.
Wow. And there are so many partners involved that have to share that information. Obviously, if you get it wrong in one, it just goes all the way down the line and screws up everything.
Well, that's it. I mean, we know supply chain can be finicky, right? And so, one of the earliest things that happens with a shipment when it gets built, right, is we schedule appointments. And who could be scheduling that appointment could be a myriad of different people, right, who's been involved. Some of those people are very experienced and understand the intricacies of hours of service and many other things, what's actually in the truck. But there's another side that they may not. And so you're putting a lot onto this shipment, which goes all the way down to the driver. That makes a huge impact to how we actually run this thing.
Right. Okay, so here we are in the world of automation, in the world of digitization. How can that help, and is that indeed coming up as a solution to these challenges?
Yeah, I think not only is it coming up, I think it's here. I mean, we're really fortunate that here at CSCMP, we're having great conversations where we're hearing from people in the industry that says, we want to address this problem. It's one of those untapped things that needs to be addressed. We're having great conversations about API connectivity and the things that not only from a 3PL or a carrier that they care about this problem, but it's actually going into the warehouses. They want to be able to allocate labor appropriately. So they want to make sure that they're going to be there and they're going to have the right appointment for that piece of equipment when it arrives.
Well, what is the main vehicle for transmitting this information now? You just said API connectivity, did you not?
Yeah, I did.
Application programming interface.
Absolutely.
There's also EDI, there's also all these other things. What is the way by which appointments are now communicated properly and in a real-time basis and whatever?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that, I think a lot of people can have the opinion that it's API or it's nothing, right? And I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory. I think API is a great avenue for that. What we found is that what matters is how can we connect, right? It doesn't matter whether it's API, whether it's EDI, whatever the connection method is, as long as the connection exists. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go about bringing this together as an industry. But I do think, we're API first as a company and as we work in this industry. And so I think we're API, that's what we want to go for, but that doesn't mean that's the only way to do it.
Yeah. Of course, it doesn't entirely solve the problem if we hear that a driver shows up at a loading dock and still has to wait 4 hours to get a load. Maybe they're on time with the appointment, but it's still part of the problem.
Dwell time is still a challenge. What we believe that with some additional data being brought into this industry, we believe that we'll be able to call out. There are things that a lot of companies don't have visibility to, like shift changes that may take place at a location. If you think about the complexity of what happens when that shift change takes place, we may find out that that's probably not the best appointment for this complex shipment that we have. Maybe it means to be broke down, maybe it takes longer to unload. And so we may even recommend, hey, let's go for another time, right? Because we know that there's a little bit more stability in that. Those are conversations that haven't been had very often in the industry, but we feel that at this point, there's a lot more dialogue about that portion of the supply chain that just hasn't existed.
What about ongoing communication, the status of drivers and the like? What if a driver gets caught in a traffic jam or something happens, they're going to be late, something's happening at the warehouse area,
Yeah.
and they want to let the driver know that it's, I mean, can all this be rolled into it too, or is that still a challenge?
Well, I think that is giving us the opportunity to solve some of these challenges. You know, if you and I were sitting here 5 years ago, Bob, you were probably sitting in that chair having a conversation with someone about visibility and the importance, and is this a real thing?
Sure.
We know it is, right? It exists. And that visibility has now layered in the opportunity to provide more information on what's actually happening with a shipment. You may think that the truck is going to be there in an hour, but true visibility tells us they won't be there for 3. And so if you've got labor allocated to unload that truck in an hour, and that truck's not going to be there, and you don't actually know when it's going to be there, your labor's hands are tied, because that truck may show up in 5 minutes, and then you have to work that truck. And so we think that that layer of visibility gives us an even greater opportunity to communicate and say, look, yes, they have this appointment, but there is someone else that is early. Take that truck now. Let's reallocate that labor to what you have in front of you, because we know that other piece of equipment isn't going to be there for several hours.
Wow, that's
and then
great.
we can capitalize on their capital investment, the human capital that is sitting right there ready to work. Let's use that now and just cut out some of that waste within the supply chain.
Great. It sounds like a solution really is in sight with this technology and this thinking, this agility that we didn't have before. Thank you so much, Tom, for explaining to me what all the challenges of appointment scheduling are. Tell me a little bit about Q.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you guys fit into this picture?
Yeah, so we are connecting the dozens and dozens of scheduling platforms. There's so many that have been built, great platforms that exist for very specific applications. And what we're doing is we're bringing those applications connected directly into TMSs for carriers and for 3PLs. That is giving instant visibility to the appointments that are available, but then it's also giving us a layer of communication to be able to explain some of these things that we've talked about, where the truck's not going to be there. Let's do an appointment swap, be able to communicate closer with the driver. All of these things that we believe are going to be really beneficial for the industry.
Tom, thanks again for being with me today to explain this issue. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
We're speaking with Tom Curee of Q'd. Thank you very much for watching.